I went years without speaking to him, and then I guess I had his phone number saved, or he had mine, and he texted me like a year ago, completely at random, just like, "What's your favorite Kanye album?" And I was like, "Oh, all right, like, hey."
Um,
and then,
full, full disclosure,
yeah,
I'm pretty sure I was with him when that happened. We were talking about like best. Was there a time where he texted you like your favorite Outcast album?
yes, yeah. Actually, I think that was the first one. I think he texted me. Oh, that's so funny that you were there for that.
We were because we were debating best Outcast albums. And we were going back between, I think he was saying Stankonia and I was saying one of the earlier ones, either ATLians or
Aquemini, I guess, or ATLians,
Aquemini.
yeah.
Yeah, I think it was Aquemini. And then somehow your name popped up when we were both like, I bet David Cohan would agree with me. And we were both saying that to each other. And I was like, why don't you
That's so
text him
funny.
and see what his what his favorite is? And it's
That like
Stankonia, right?
that like made my week. That was during like a really bad week, and I was like, "This is the funniest thing." And like that was actually like that was a good pick me up. But I was also like very prepared to answer that question. And sorry to
Yeah.
say, I am Team Stankonia. Although you really honestly can't go wrong with any of their albums. So
Yeah.
I'm not going to say you were not correct.
What's the answer for best Kanye album?
Oh God, I mean, that question is a whole new tone now than it did like 6 months ago. We definitely didn't line up on that because I was like, oh, Yeezus for sure, and he's like, what? but I've always been a huge fan of that one. I liked, I mean, everybody goes Dark Twisted Fantasy, but I like where he like kind of. I feel like Yeezus was
Yeah.
him like taking a brick and throwing it through the stained glass window kind of thing, and that
Yeah.
sort of appealed to me more at the time. It's now I'm kind of sitting and seeing like, I mean, he was one of my favorite artists for a long time, but I'm also Jewish,
Yeah.
so obviously it's a bit of a
Yeah.
quandary. So like I'm kind of waiting to see where he's going to land in like my personal views in a couple of years. But the album still slap.
Yeah, it's tough listening to his music.
Yeah,
like, fuck, like I mean, essentially the run from College Dropout to like Pablo is like one of
yeah,
the best runs any musician's ever made. But then you
yeah,
hear him
totally.
speak
Kind
and
of
you're
same
like,
deal. You
this
make an
guy
argument
is
for any
like,
of them.
yeah, you're like, this guy is a total nutcase. But
Yeah,
like his music is great in part because he's such a nutcase, and like he's not saying like anything offensive in the music, but is that like enough of a reason to
yeah.
still listen to it? It's it's tough.
If he finally, because he supposedly was going to name one of his albums Hitler, so if he ever drops the Hitler album, I think that's probably when the die gets fully cast. It's like,
Yeah.
but it would like for me, it would be funny if it's like I hate to say it, but Hitler kind of slaps. Like,
Oh no, that would be awful. It took me a while
yeah,
to like get back to not skipping one of his songs if they came on shuffle. Like it
yeah,
just like it still like feels kind of icky. Not kind of icky. It feels super icky when one of his songs pops up.
yeah. But like, it's still. I feel like it's so tied to this, like kind of the same time period where like we were hanging out and stuff. This sort of like late high school, like you're starting to really form like your adult tastes in art kind of thing.
Yeah.
So you can't really like I don't know, I don't feel like I'll ever fully be able to get rid of it. It's just sort of like
Yeah.
shifting how I view it. But I yeah no I mean there's some songs I'm never gonna be able to skip unfortunately.
Yeah. Dude, I was just thinking when we were like going back and like favorite Kanye album, favorite Outkast album. I feel like this is just we're like right back in Minchin's classroom.
Oh
Just
yeah.
like bullshitting about about favorite pieces of art and like yeah, man, like I feel like a lot of my movie taste currently ties back to conversations that like we were having. Like we were sort of like coming into our formative, I guess like formative tastes at the same time together. And I feel like we would bounce. You were someone who I would bounce like a lot of like just like understandings of things that I liked and didn't like off of. Ladies and gentlemen, screenagers all across the wasteland, welcome back into the Canon, the only movie podcast providing you with the most essentials movie watch list. Today, I'm very happy. We have a very special guest, an old friend of mine, someone who has totally informed my taste as a film watcher. we go way back. We used to chat about movies together in our high school AP Gov class, and now we're here. David Cohan, welcome to the Canon. Thanks for being on, brother. How are you doing? How's LA?
It's cool. It's I mean the nowadays things are kind of spicy here in the entertainment industry, obviously,
Yeah.
but like overall I like it. I've been here. It's gonna be 10 years in January, and I never
Damn.
really thought I was gonna be here that long, and it still kind of trips me out sometimes.
Yeah.
But it's a pretty good time. Like I think I think if you're not if you're not from here, haven't spent a lot of time here, people think it's like really fake or like really manufactured. But there is, I feel like, a really vibrant local culture here that a lot of people don't know about. And like once you spend a lot of time in it, especially if like I'm a transplant, but I try not to approach things as like a clueless transplant. So like if you kind of open yourself up to that, there's a lot of cool stuff here. But it is a lot of driving and traffic. That part's true.
Yeah. Where in LA do you live?
I live just outside Culver City, technically in Palms, but like kind of right above Culver City. So it's on the west side.
Okay.
Probably about like 10
kind
minutes
of north?
east of Santa Monica.
Okay. Cool.
Kind of like center west, but not all the way west. It's kind of like if like this is downtown,
like Santa Monica's
here,
like
Santa Monica's here.
Okay. Nice.
Yeah.
Is that a cool
So
area?
yeah, like 15-minute drive to the beach. I'd say like Culver is it doesn't it's a really old neighborhood, so it's got some cool stuff like that, but it's also like a bunch of streaming studios have moved here recently, and it's like really sucking any of the energy out of it fast. It's like gentrifying super quick.
Yeah.
So like there's a lot of like like expensive high-rise apartments now, and well, high-rise by LA standards, probably like 6 floors, but and a lot of like Silicon Valley types who like had come down to Santa Monica and now are kind of moving eastward from there.
Yeah.
So like it has a lot of neighborhood. I mean, a lot of it has a bit of personality, but like I'm worried it's kind of getting stifled out because like Amazon just bought this huge studio, near us, and then obviously I work at Sony, which has been here a little longer because Sony just works out of the old MGM studios, so that's been here a really long time. But kind of like Apple, HBO, all this other stuff has moved in, and it's kind of starting to get pretty techy over here. But I like it. It's close to a lot of stuff, and it's close to where I work. So like I'm the only guy who doesn't have to wait like 30 minutes in traffic at least to go to my job. So that's nice.
Do you still have to drive
to
work?
Like to work
walk?
Or
like to work.
I could walk. It's like a mile and change. So like a lot of times I'll walk home, but usually in the morning if I'm like rushing to work, I don't. I'll drive still. But I've been working from home a lot. We're still actually kind of hybrid at Sony, which is nice.
Yeah.
So
nice.
So I'm one of the few people that's like I actually feel like I do better work in the office. So like sometimes I try to get over there. But I'm also like obviously a huge advocate for hybrid working. I think it appeals to so many people and helps us get a lot more people. So I would never be one of those like we have to go back to the office kind of guys.
Yeah, that makes sense. I do want to table the Sony discussion, but we'll come back to that. Have you been in this neighborhood in Culver like the whole time that you've been in LA, or have you like moved around?
I moved around a little bit. Let me think. I started in Burbank, which is like, have you ever been out here?
Yeah, I've been out a few times. It's been a while. I will be. Yeah. I think I'll most likely be there in October. But yeah, I haven't been there in a few years. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, I lived in Burbank, which is a very odd place. Like I feel like in a good way. I think it's like it's sort of like in some ways it reminded me of Newro in that it's this like older suburban town, but it's also like there's so many. It's right near Warner Brothers Studios, and there's so many like weird little like cinematic oddities over there. My favorite thing about living in Burbank was I lived a block, speaking of Reservoir Dogs, I lived a block away from the Safari Inn, which showed up a bunch in Reservoir Dogs. I think that's where Mr. White was staying. So it had this big like surfboard logo and stuff.
Okay.
And it was literally like feet away from my apartment. So I thought that was really funny. And it was kind of an offbeat place. And I lived there for like a year. And then I moved over to Mid City, which is like sort of similar area to Culver, but even more east. It's like 15 minutes down that way. And
that's
then
where like all the agencies are and stuff, right?
Yeah, just below. Like I was just below that. Yeah.
Okay.
it's like kind of like that's like the Wilshire
Or is
area, and
that
so I
that's like
live.
Century City where the
It's both. Yeah, I mean, Century City
okay.
has agencies too. Century City also has like the Nakatomi Plaza Tower from Die Hard, and like it,
Yeah. Okay.
it's sort of empty over there, except for these like actual big buildings that have agencies in it. But
Yeah.
they got a decent mall. I go to the movie theater over there sometimes.
Nice.
But
Uh
yeah, so I lived in Mid City for a while, and then I moved over to the apartment I'm currently in 2017. I've been here ever since.
nice, man.
Yeah.
Did you meet your fiance out there or did you guys go to school together?
No, I met her out here. I met her. It feels ancient to say this at this point, but I met her on OkCupid.
Oh,
So
nice.
so she was going to USC out here, and
Mhm.
she was like she was a junior at the time, and I was just freshly graduated,
Mhm.
and like at that point, like really living the like unemployed, sending out job interviews, but like basically just couch surfing
Yeah.
and smoking weed all day kind of thing.
Yeah.
and,
The LA
and
dream.
so when she met me, I was in yeah. So when she met me, I was in a totally different headspace. But yeah, no, we hit it off really well, and have stuck together ever since. But she actually works with me too, and everybody thinks we met at work. But I'd met her before that.
And then she started working
Yeah, I
with
guess
you at Sony.
slightly a nepotism hire, but I
Yeah.
wasn't the one who hired her, so I don't think that. It's
What
they were putting out they put out like an open call for jobs. I was like, she'd be good
yeah.
at this, and so I
Yeah.
sent it her way. And like, I never thought she'd be there as long as I was, and now we've been coworkers for a long
That's
time
sweet.
too. Yeah,
Has that been your only job out there? Or did you bounce
yeah.
around at all before that?
I mean, I did a couple odd, I helped out on like a couple student films and things like that. And
Hmm.
for a little while with this company that did like actor reels for people trying to get into SAG, but like that was all fairly, part time work. But Sony
Hmm.
is the only full time job I've ever had at a couple different places at Sony, but all kind of under the umbrella.
Sweet. And so do you and your fiance, do you guys work in like the same department division? Do you guys like actually work
We
together or just like both work at Sony?
we work in the same. We both work at Sony Pictures Image Works, so it's the same area.
Hmm.
And now we actually do the same thing, but usually on different shows. The cool thing about Sony is there's no company policy against dating a coworker as long
Hmm.
as it's not like a higher up situation, you know.
Yeah.
So so like everybody knows that we're. I mean, well now she's my fiance, but even when we were first
Yeah.
starting to date, everybody knew we were together and stuff. So they're usually pretty good about not putting us right on the same show where I have to like bug her for like,
Yeah.
like shot updates or something like that. So we work in the same area, but not we've never worked together on the same project.
Okay. Nice.
Yeah.
Okay. So now I have to ask. I've I've been meaning to ask you this for years, but so like what is it exactly that you do at Sony? Like what
Oh
is
yeah.
your like what's your role? Like what's your job?
So I've been for the most part I've worked at Sony Pictures Image Works, which is like
Hmm.
their CG animation and VFX company.
Okay.
And it's cool because they do a lot of projects for Sony, but they also will get contracted by other studios to work too because they're like kind of one of the premier companies for that. So I
Hmm.
work under the Sony banner, but I've gotten to work on a lot of different movies. And my job title is basically just production coordinator. So like what I do is if you imagine, if you're working on a movie and let's say we're working on like a fully animated film, you try to imagine it like kind of like a car on an assembly line. So
Hmm.
like, there's different departments that kind of do different things to get a shot from on paper to complete. So like the assets department will they'll kind of model all the characters, props, and environments. Layout will then kind of put them in a scene and do the camera work. Animation will get
Hmm.
everything moving, all the way down to like lighting. It lights everything, and basically each of those departments has a different group of artists that are specialized in different ways. And then the production coordinators are sort of the people on the production side who kind of oversee it. So I don't do any artwork myself or anything like that, but basically what I do
Hmm.
is I'll be put in one of these departments and just have to oversee, we have a certain amount of shots we have to finish in a week, or
Hmm.
we may have to do, a certain thing on a shot and we'll need help from another department. So I'll reach out to them and kind of thing.
Yeah.
And I also just kind of make sure the artists are okay and have what they
Yeah.
need. And if they do any overtime, that it's all like approved and not, not off board, and they get food and all that stuff. And lots of
Nice.
note taking. That's probably the
Yeah.
number one thing. Just constant note taking. So,
So is sorry, go
oh
ahead.
yeah, go on.
I was just gonna ask, is it
Sorry, I think it was a slight delay.
damn it. Sorry.
You go.
Keep going, please.
So I was just gonna say that, yeah. So like right now, I'm working on I actually, when we were talking this whole time, I hadn't had any work. I was
Hmm.
kind of in between projects, and things are a little slow at the moment with the strikes and everything like that.
Yeah, yeah.
Obviously, although what we do doesn't, like right now, I'm not crossing a picket line or anything, which I'm
Hmm.
very glad about.
Yeah.
but yeah, I've just started to pick up work on a live action VFX project that's delivering in like a month. So it's really insane to jump on that late in the game. But
Damn.
that's kind of what I've been doing is like kind of helping to oversee things over there as they kind of bring it to the end.
Okay. So that actually answers the question that I was going to ask. I was wondering if you just did production work for animated projects, or if you did like live action VFX as well. And I guess
I've
the
done a
answer
bit of
is
both.
yeah.
Yeah, I've done a bit of both. I would say I certainly like the full CG stuff better.
Yeah.
It's a little, it's usually a little bit more orderly. The timeline's usually a bit longer, and you
Hmm.
don't have to deal as much with things like, oh, by the way, here's like 50 reshoots that we've done, and this entire shot has completely changed since you finaled it.
Yeah.
It's a lot less hectic usually. The
Hmm.
exception being something like Spider-Verse, where we're like,
Hmm.
breaking everything over and over again to get the shot to look right. But like, yeah, usually I prefer the CG work. I happen to have been picking up a lot of VFX work recently just because there hasn't been a ton of CG work at the moment.
Hmm.
But I'm
So
hoping, oh yeah, I'm hoping by around like January or so to get back on a CG project.
when you, I feel like I've seen you tweet about this,
Mhm.
but can you break down like the difference between what you mean by CG work and like what you mean by live action like VFX work? Because I feel like
Oh yeah,
for like film fans, like a lot of us, even though we, you know, want to pretend to be informed, we don't fully know what we're talking about when we mention things like CG or VFX. So what is like how would you break those two things down?
oh sure. So CG work basically, it refers to like anything where like everything you see in a shot, was computer generated. So obviously, like for full animated movies, something like your Spider-Verse, there's not going to be
Hmm.
any like, well, oh, I guess actually Spider-Verse, there was a little bit of live action in this new one with
Yeah.
Donald Glover. Sorry, spoilers, but
That's fair.
but like by and large, like full CG means like everything you're seeing on screen was generated and animated, through computers. Whereas live action VFX is sort of a catch-all term for like, you'll shoot something, let's say like I worked on, Ant-Man not too long ago. So like,
Hmm.
you'll shoot Paul Rudd on camera and stuff like that, but he'll be in front of a
Yeah.
blue screen, and then you'll put a bunch of, exploding crap behind him.
Yeah.
And so that's kind of more, if I refer to like a VFX project, that's kind of more what I'm talking about. It's a lot, it can get a lot more complicated than that.
But
I'm
that's
doing like
like
a
the basic.
really big
Yeah.
oversimplification. But yeah.
I still think that oversimplification is like something that online film discourse still somehow misses. So I feel like it is important
Yeah.
to to clear it up. Are there situations in like a live action or like an otherwise live action film where there are shots that are completely computer generated,
Oh yeah, all the time.
like the end
Um,
of Avengers Endgame?
yeah, something like that. I would imagine most of that was done, or a lot of that was done, like full CG. I'd say
Hmm.
like in my experience, definitely, especially if it's like there aren't really people in the shot and there's just like a giant spaceship like shooting at a bunch of, like crowds and stuff like that or something.
Yeah.
That's usually going to be all CG. We try to use, like what's called plates. Plates are the term for the live action shots that we bring in, and put stuff on top of. So we try
Hmm.
to use plates whenever we can, but sometimes it's just not feasible if the lighting's off or if a character is kind of moving in a way where it would look really weird, sometimes it's better to use a like a full CG version instead. Although that can come back to bite you, as is also seen in the discourse, where somebody will
Yeah.
post something and be like, "None of this looks real," and like that sort of
Yeah.
it's kind of a delicate balance.
Yeah. Damn. So, all right, you mentioned Spider-Verse and you mentioned Ant-Man. I know you've worked on a ton of other projects. Is there one that was like your favorite thing to work on? Like the most fun, the most fulfilling?
I mean, I gotta say Spider-Verse, obviously, especially the first one.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it felt very. We knew as we were making it that we were really doing some different shit. Like
Yeah.
I remember getting shown the concept art for it like right around when I started at Sony. A
Mm-hmm.
couple of years before it actually got made. I was going like, if you guys can actually do this, this would be crazy. But like, there's no
Yeah.
way it's going to look like this on screen. And then it did. And that was,
Yeah.
it's still, especially because I'm not an artist. A lot of this really does still feel like magic. It's like,
Yeah.
I'll manage an artist team and I'll say like, hey, we need, in Spider-Verse, I was in the effects department. So like,
Mm-hmm.
explosions, glitching, like all the like particulate type stuff was what we were
Mm-hmm.
working on. So like to see someone be like, yeah, I'm gonna do like the collider explosion and then come back with a fully realized shot of the collider exploding was still like
Yeah.
crazy for me to witness. And then
That, like-
obviously like really all the reception for it and the people, like the first Spider-Verse didn't do that well in theaters, but like seeing
Mhm.
it get the kind of like cult reputation it did, and especially really like seeing a lot of the kids being like, I see myself as Spider-Man and I never did before,
Yeah.
was like such an insanely gratifying thing to me. And the Oscar was cool too. Like I'm not gonna
like you're part of, like you're part of that. You're fully 100% like part of the reason why that movie won an Oscar.
Yeah,
which is pretty
people
amazing.
asked me if I got a statue, and I was like, "Oh God, no!" But they let us hold it.
That's pretty rad. So I think this might be a first.
They're cool about that.
This is probably a first for the Canon. I think you're our first Oscar winner to appear on the show, which is pretty big news.
Well,
yeah.
Hopefully many more after me, especially ones who could maybe like pull the trophy off their shelf or something.
Also, Spider-Verse is in the Canon, so whenever that episode comes around, we'll bring you back on and we will we'll have a more in-depth conversation about it.
Yeah, sure, I'd be happy to. That's sick.
Yeah, man, that's really sweet. I remember watching it with my roommates, and I like knew from you like posting about it and stuff that you had worked on the movie. And like after we watched it, I was like, guys, we gotta like check out the credits. Like my buddy from high school worked on this movie, and seeing your name in the credits is like, it felt like I had won an Oscar in a way.
Oh, dude, that's awesome. I love that.
Even though I didn't help you in any way, shape, or form.
Hey, you know what? We can take it all back to Mitch's class, and like, I mean, I feel like so much of that time period like solidified my interest in film, and like really, that was when I started applying for colleges, and or I guess I'd kind of been into applying colleges by 17, but like,
yeah,
that's when I was really like, I want to go to a school with a good film department so that I can really kind of pursue this. That's sort of where all that kind of glued together. So, it's all interconnected for sure.
I do remember you like senior year saying like, I'm going to go study film and then I'm going to become a filmmaker. And I was like, yeah, same. And now you are actually doing that. And I just talk about movies.
Hey, but that's still good. We're both doing it in some way.
But I did also want to ask if like your work at Sony, if I'm sure at some point you were thinking like big time director, the sort of like dream that every aspiring filmmaker has. But like, have you found the work that you're doing now to be like, do you feel like you're in a good place within the industry? Are you like doing work that you enjoy? Is there another move for you, or like where do you stand on all that stuff?
So I'm definitely happy with this corner of the industry for a lot of reasons. I figured out pretty quickly after I moved out here. I think at the end of college, I really got into post-production. I really wanted to be an editor or something like that. And I still really like that work. It's funny how a lot of filmmakers are divided, where some people just like love spending hours in the editing lab, and other people are like, if I look at 5 versions of a different shot, I'm gonna fucking kill myself. But I've always like really liked that aspect of it. And I thought that was what I wanted to do, but I sort of figured out really quickly that I loved being creative and never wanted my paycheck to depend on that.
Mm-hmm.
So I started really thinking about, like what kind of work can I do that will put me near all of this awesome creativity, but at the same time, like it's not me putting my art up there for a bunch of directors to be like, well, this sucks and like change this and da da da,
Yeah. Yeah.
So, and it was that coupled with just like at that point, I was interviewing for any job that came up,
Mm-hmm.
and just figure like whatever, I'll get my foot in the door and then figure it out. So I definitely in like 2014 when I was applying for jobs like this one, my thought wasn't necessarily like, oh, I'm going to get in at ImageWorks and I'm just only going to do animation for the rest of my life.
Yeah.
But it sort of happened that way, and I was excited just because like, now that I think about it, like of course there are, but at the time I was like, I didn't know you could work in this industry if you weren't an artist. Like I didn't
Yeah.
know, like I was one of those kids who would like watch like Shrek on DVD, but then watch all the special features and like see how they storyboarded everything and be like, that's so
Yeah.
cool. Like, so
Yeah.
actually getting to be around that and even getting to meet a couple of the guys who were in that was insane.
That's awesome, man.
Yeah. So I fell into it by accident, but I do really like it.
Mm-hmm.
I'd like to, I obviously want to keep moving up. I'd love to be like an assistant manager, like
Mm-hmm.
a project manager at some point and, just get kind of, move up the ladder there. But I'm hoping not to move, especially because, I think if studios allow it, there is kind of like a creative boom happening in animation right now. And it's sort of this push and pull between all this like really exciting new stuff happening and studios being like, yeah, we're not funding animation.
Yeah. But like, didn't the Spider-Verse sequel make like $1 zillion?
It
I
did.
assume.
And it's like that's helped blown the door open a little bit,
Yeah.
It's cool to see, we were wondering if we were going to see stuff that kind of looks like Spider-Verse after it, but
Mm-hmm.
it's actually been kind of neat to see, the most recent like Puss in Boots movies got kind of that style, and then this Teenage Mutant
Yeah.
Ninja Turtles movie that's in theaters also kind of
Yeah.
definitely harkens back to it a little bit. It's kind of cool to see this sort of explosion of stuff that looks like that. I hope it's going to inspire, as much as I love Spider-Verse, I'd love to see some
Mm-hmm.
like non-huge IP animated stuff get really popular.
Yeah.
And it's happening in bits and bursts, but that's a concern for the industry overall.
Yeah. Damn. I feel like we could chat about the state of animation for hours.
Oh sure.
But yeah. I guess we could also try to move on to the movie we're supposed to be talking about. But that was all
Mm-hmm.
super awesome, and it was very fun catching up. So today we're talking about Stanley Kubrick's classic Dr. Strangelove. I'm not going to say the whole name because I'll probably trip over some part of it. But when we were talking about you coming on the show and like a potential movie to talk about, I was trying to think of movies. I think the classic or the easy answer for us based on like our past relationship and movies that we've talked about would have been Reservoir Dogs. But Strangelove feels like it's sort of in a similar vein. You hadn't seen it before. Like
No,
this,
I
right?
hadn't. I was pretty embarrassed to admit that to you. I actually like you texted me and you said me you sent me a couple different. I won't say what the other ones were, but you sent me a couple of different movies, and two of them that I'd seen and were very familiar with, and then this one which I'd been meaning to watch for years.
Yeah.
I mean, I remember even in high school, I don't know if you called this your favorite movie, but it was at least like really high up there in high school. And I remember being
Yeah.
17 and being like, oh yeah, I'm totally gonna get on that. And then you text me like,
So it took some time, but we finally got there.
yeah. Yeah, no, and like I even briefly was like, should I tell if I gonna lose like all credibility in your eyes if I'm like, I am 31 and I haven't seen like one of the classics of American cinema.
I try not to be one of those like movie guys who's like, or like one of those people who's like, you consider yourself a movie person and you've never seen Casablanca? Like, there are thousands of movies, and you get to the ones you get to, and if you haven't seen something that's considered a classic, it's fine, because I know that you've seen a bunch of other great movies.
Yeah, totally. I feel like that's something both of us probably must get a lot. Is like, oh, you're a
Yeah,
film guy, but you haven't seen this. And it drives
yeah.
me freaking crazy. I'm sure you too.
You've never you've never seen The Godfather? Like, I
Yeah,
have seen
that
The
one I managed to
Godfather.
get to. Yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, man, Doctor Strangelove. I think so. You just recently watched it. I saw this for the first time at age like 17, and I was totally blown away. This was sort of in the similar vein as something like Reservoir Dogs, or like a bunch of other movies. That Reservoir Dogs is like the one example, but I'm sure there are so many other movies that we would talk about, um, you know, when we were in our late teens. But this was like one of those movies that I watched at that period of time and was like, oh, like, people can do amazing things with movies. Like, people can make insane pieces of art that, even if it's 50 years old, you're still going to connect with. Like, I remember watching it and like remembering like, oh, like someone chose different camera angles and like camera shots to use, and then someone else chose to edit them together in a specific way. It was like one of those movies that made me aware of like the process of filmmaking, which I feel like is pretty cool. I don't know how you felt, or if you caught any of that watching it for the first time as a 31-year-old who has been working in the film industry for 10 plus years. But I am curious, just like your general thoughts on Strangelove after your first viewing.
I did somewhat. I mean, first of all, like I feel like that time when we're like 16, 17, I feel like for so many, people who either watch a lot of movies or work in it or discuss it a lot, like that's kind of the time where it starts to settle in, like the concept of like movies as text, the idea that there's
Yeah.
this large pantheon of films from different times that can hit you in different ways. But actually watching as a 31-year-old, I was kind of glad I didn't watch it at 17, because I was kind of a jerk at 17. I feel like I wouldn't have necessarily had the, not that this movie requires a huge attention span, but I think some of what makes it so great would have been lost on me at that age. I would have just been like, we're all just
Yeah.
sitting at a table talking, like I think definitely as a 31-year-old with a bit more of a concept of like the existential dread of the fact that we're all sitting on large nuclear warheads, and B, just a better concept of satire. I really got a lot more out of this. Although I appreciate you humoring me on this, because I realized there was this huge risk of me watching it and just being like, yeah, it was the biggest piece of dog shit. And then we wouldn't really have a podcast after that.
That would have been tough. But I feel like it's a hard movie to not like. I guess, some people, not everyone will jive with it or jibe with it. I recently found out that you jibe with something with a B. It's not jive with a V.
Really? I didn't know that.
Yeah. I still like want to refuse to believe that, but apparently that is so.
That's like a Berenstein Bears thing.
Wait, that's
crazy.
Not.
I didn't know that.
What's the Berenstein Bears thing?
Oh, you never heard it? It's like, I forget how it's spelled, but it's like however like the Berenstein Bears is spelled. I think it's like with an AIN at the end, and everyone's like, no, it was with an EIN, and like collective memory says it was spelled one way, but it was actually spelled another way. And like, yeah, I've heard that kind of compared to a lot of things where like people think it's one thing but it's another.
I don't like that either. I don't like it one bit. No, I was confident in recommending us talking about Doctor Strangelove, because I feel like I felt like I know your sensibilities enough to know like that this would be a movie that you would totally be like, oh yeah, that's rad. I feel like it would. I was confident that this would be something that would click for you. So I'm happy that it did work out that way. There's so many things that we can talk about in this movie, and so many things that we should talk about. I kind of don't know. I'm like overwhelmed in terms of where we should start. I don't know if there's anything that stuck out to you that you want to mention sort of just off the bat, and we can like take it from there.
I guess I would say what really a couple. I mean, obviously, like tons of stuff really, really stuck with me about watching this for the first time. But I'd say like a huge one for me was that I've seen a bunch of Kubrick. Obviously, I mean, I'm sure any of us in this position have. And it felt very much of his, like of his essence, but at the same time felt so different from any of the other Kubrick movies I've watched.
Yeah,
like it like the fact that it's like a political satire, and that it's it's a little less, like there isn't a ton of moving camera, or like like I feel like like this movie is much more based in the dialogue than around the visuals, although the visuals are important too. And like it was really, it moved at a different clip than any other Kubrick movie I've seen.
Yeah, it's a lot faster than most other Kubrick movies. Like a lot of other Kubrick movies like require a shit ton of patience, and this one just sort of throws you in, and it's like, hey, we're off to the races, and all this stuff is happening, and all these characters are here, and a bunch of shit's hitting the fan.
Yeah, well, like right at the start.
Yeah,
I feel like this is like I don't know. Some people might argue differently, but I feel like this is sort of like the first movie where Kubrick, like you can start looking at Kubrick as like an auteur, and it's easy to see why. I mean, it's such sorry to the Lolita fans out there, but also like maybe go talk to a therapist. But like here, I think it really is like such a step forward, and then he basically carries that momentum from there through the entire rest of his career. It feels like such a such a like a ground shaking event, kind of.
Yeah,
for him.
The run is definitely Strangelove to Eyes Wide Shut. The other movies are all there, and some of them are great. Others are pretty good. He like really didn't make a bad movie. But this is definitely the one where it's like, oh, that's what this guy can do.
Yeah, totally.
Like, oh, he's the best director of all time. That's my opinion. I'm a super basic film bro. I think Stanley Kubrick is the greatest director to ever live, and Doctor Strangelove is one of the best examples of that, in my humble opinion. But yeah, what else stood out to you?
I mean, just like how sharp the commentary was. I mean, Kubrick, I feel like there's, in a lot of his films, there's definitely references to political issues. Some of them are borderline satirical, but this is like, to my knowledge, like really the only like outright like political satire that he's done. And it was funny watching this and thinking like he could have taken this and made a whole career out of this. He could have been like, I don't know, I guess like a like the Larry Charles of his day or something like that. Just like a guy who like kind of only does these like black, like political black comedies, and it would have probably worked out great for him. But he's Kubrick, so he's going to follow this up with 2001 instead.
Absolutely insane. Do you think watching this in any way like recontextualize the rest of his career and the rest of his movies? Like, do you feel like you got sort of a different look into Kubrick and like what he was doing with his filmography, or not so much?
Somewhat. I mean, it kind of helps to see how they're all in conversation with each other. I think this movie was obviously made, coming out of obviously, the panic of like World War II, and I mean, the Cuban Missile Crisis had just happened like a year before this, and Kennedy had just been assassinated. A lot of stuff's happening obviously in the early 60s, and it was kind of interesting to see how we went from this to, without going into it, because I'm sure there's gonna be another episode, like fully dedicated to it or something, but like into 2001, which I think, is kind of more about unease of, the space race, and, like kind of increases in technology. And, you take that, you move on a little later, and it's like Full Metal Jacket's obviously like a very overt commentary on the war, and it's kind of like all this stuff is sort of happening at the same time in a way that was really interesting to see. And yeah, I don't think I mean, I gave that some thought, but definitely a lot more after seeing this and being like, oh, this is sort of where the explosion happened, pun intended.
Yeah. Absolutely great pun. Yeah, I feel like, to me, Kubrick's career even from like Paths of Glory through
Mm-hmm.
the end, it's sort of all about like people in power and how dopey they can be and how we like hold them up in such high regard. Like you think, President of the United States, the Joint Chiefs of Staff, all these people, they got to be so smart and they must have their shit together because they hold such positions of power. And really, Kubrick's like, sometimes they're kind of like idiots, and it affects the rest of us in awful ways. And Strangelove is like the most obvious example of that because it affects all of us in the worst way possible because the world ends.
Yeah, totally. I totally agree. And like, actually, like one thing I loved about this movie was like it's really smart and biting political satire, but at the same time, it also appeals to the person in me who will laugh for 5 minutes at the name President Birkin Muffley. So like, it really kind of has something for everybody on that front. It's like it's so sharp and so
Yeah.
relevant, and like so much of it rings true, but it's also like so silly.
Yeah, it's I do have in my notes just so many great names. This is
Yeah, I was listing names in my notes.
yeah. Lionel Mandrake is an underrated funny name.
Yeah, no, him. My favorite was actually was Colonel Bat Guano, the guy who comes in to Mandrake at the end, and just
Yeah.
like that shit. This is basically
Yeah.
his name.
His line of, maybe we can get into this too because there are so many great just like comedic one-liners, but his line of, okay, well, you're gonna have to answer to the Coca-Cola company.
That was one of my favorite parts of the whole movie. I love that because it's like on the front, it's such a stupid joke, but it also like it really does mean something. It's clearly it's like no matter who we answer to, we all answer to like these corporate overlords, and
Yeah.
using something as like a great American company as Coca Cola, which today you could make that same joke and it would pretty much
Yeah.
still land.
Like, okay, before we make any decisions about the war, we should see how the Coca-Cola company feels about all of this. Because,
Exactly. Yeah.
yeah, if we drop a nuclear bomb, that might affect their stock prices.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's like it. So many of the funny lines are they're so quick and sharp, but then, like you're breaking it down right now. Like if you take a couple of seconds, a couple of steps back to think about the layers to it, it's just like absolutely insane.
Yeah.
The go-to great line of you can't fight in here, this is the war room, is
Mm-hmm.
absolutely incredible. One of the funniest lines of all time. In some of the research that I was doing for this episode, and I feel like I had heard this before, but my memory was jogged. Apparently when Reagan was elected and was getting his like first tour of the White House, he was like, so when are you guys going to show me the war room? And whoever was showing him around was like, dude, that doesn't exist. That was literally
That's
just made
so
up for
funny.
Dr. Strangelove.
I never knew that. That's crazy.
Absolutely amazing. But like, I mean, I'm sure when I first watched this, I probably thought that there was a war room. I'm sure for like several years until I heard that joke about Reagan. I was like, yeah, Bush and all of those guys, they're sitting around in the war room making decisions about, who and where to drop some bombs.
Yeah, totally. I kept thinking of that famous picture of like of when Obama was president and they did the raid on the Bin Laden compound. There's that picture of
Yeah.
like all the Joint Chiefs of Staff at the table, like kind of watching like this. And like that was kind of the closest analog I could think of. Although even that I think was just like a conference room.
Yeah.
There was
You would
big
think
board.
you would but sir, he could see the big board.
That was my other favorite running gag in the movie was how obsessed Buck Turgidson was with the big board, and like that point where he it's kind of skipping ahead, but like where he like trips and falls and then like gets up and he's like no, but look at the big board. It's like that was like incredible physical comedy.
Another great piece of trivia, that take was not planned. Like it wasn't in the script for him to trip and fall. George C. Scott actually just fell during the take and kept going. And I guess he really didn't want Kubrick to use it. And Kubrick just thought that was the best take. So it made it into the movie.
That's so funny. I mean, Kubrick was right.
Yeah, it's amazing. The way that he that he stays with it and points up, look at the big board. The obsession with the
Yeah.
big board is amazing. What other great lines are there? Oh, his other great line of the potential fallout where he's estimating how many lives would be lost. We estimate that we'd
Oh
only
yeah.
lose 10 to 20
It was,
million.
yeah, I wrote it somewhere, but yeah, no, that actually it was crazy because I watched this movie twice. I watched it
Mhm.
like 2 or 3 weeks ago when we first talked about doing this, and
Yeah.
I watched it again this morning. And
Dedication.
oh yeah, no, well, also very very good rewatch movie. I feel
Yeah.
like I think the first time I was really like studying it. This time I was just like laughing and watching it.
Yeah.
It was kind of good to do it twice. But the first time I watched it was like 2 days after seeing Oppenheimer, and like I won't really dig into that one since that's not
Yeah.
that's a whole other thing. But it felt. Did you see Oppenheimer?
I'm seeing it tomorrow.
Oh God. Okay. Well, there's a line in Oppenheimer that you're gonna know immediately. That's gonna make you think of that line about the civilian casualties. You're gonna know exactly what it is when you see it,
Okay. I can't
and
wait.
that's all I'll say.
I love it. Yeah, dude. I don't know if Oppenheimer is one of your recommendations, but I saw something online where someone said that this movie is the midway point between Barbie and Oppenheimer, and I can see it.
Wow. Yeah, absolutely. That's hilarious. But yeah,
Yeah. I saw Barbie
it
again last night, and there it's obviously not intentional, like the movie is just top of mind because I just saw it, but there definitely there's some validity to that point.
yeah, I'd say so. I did like the full Barbenheimer the day of, and like yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
And yeah, Oppenheimer is not one of my recommendations, but I do recommend it. If that makes like
Yeah.
it's definitely like I feel like you're going to get a lot out of it having just talked about this going into that. There's
Yeah.
definitely like a solid conversation there.
Yeah. I love that. I'm very, very pumped. Let's see. I'm trying to think if there are any more great lines that I wrote down. This wasn't a line of dialogue, but another great joke was outside of the base where Ripper was holed up is the on the sign it says peace is our mission or peace is our
Yeah,
profession. Yeah. As like you have the troops outside shooting at the building.
yeah, exactly. I loved Ripper saying he was quoting. I forget the name of the guy he was quoting, but when he said war is too important to be left to the generals, and
Mhm.
how like so much of what Ripper was doing was obviously completely wrong, but that one line's actually like is proven super correct in this film.
Yeah, yeah. He's like, yeah, I don't think that war is like should be left in the hands of politicians, but he
Yeah.
that original quote was right. Is that when he mentions that quote? Is that when Kubrick is doing that like insane low angle shot of him with the cigar in his mouth? Because that is one of the best shots in the history of movies.
It was definitely around there. I feel like that might have been a two shot with Mandrake, but it was
Yeah.
in that same sequence. uh, but yeah, no, that is a great shot, and like I don't even think the cigar is lit in his mouth. I was watching it, and I was like, "Is there even smoke coming out of it?" It's just,
Yeah.
it's just him
It's just
sitting
there to
there.
be a prop. I think my favorite sort of my favorite shot, my favorite piece of editing, my favorite just like piece of filmmaking in this movie, which always stands out to me every time I rewatch it, is one of those early shots, one of those early sequences of Mandrake and Ripper when they're on the phone, and when it's cutting in between the two of them, every shot of Mandrake it's the same angle, same shot, like same camera setup, and then whenever it cuts back to Ripper, it's just like catching him from all different angles. And it's like, oh, this dude is like literally manic and all over the place. While this other guy, Mandrake, is just like totally stable. Everything is the same. He's super calm. It's very standard.
Yeah,
And also like his name is Jack D. Ripper. So
yeah,
obviously
it's
he's,
just right there on the.
yeah, he's kind of a freaking psycho. um,
Yeah,
but it's
that's
just
a good
like,
catch. I don't think I realized that, but yeah, that's great. Yeah,
I think it's just because I've seen this movie so many times, and I'm sure there are like so many other examples of great like pieces of filmmaking and stuff. But to me, that's just like the best example of Kubrick using all of the tools of cinema to to tell a story. What did you think of like the cinematography as a whole in this
Well, it's
flick?
interesting because it's like it's the only Kubrick movie I've seen besides like probably Spartacus, which I saw a really long time ago, so I can't quite
Hmm.
speak on the techniques in that one. But like it's the only Kubrick movie I've seen where the camera doesn't move so much,
Hmm.
which was really interesting. You know, it's like so not what I'm used to when I watch a Kubrick movie, and you know, obviously
Yeah.
some of that is just technological limitations and things like that. But it was really cool to me to see that he could still have this really unique point of view and this really, you know, great visual style without doing the things that I would typically associate with the look of a Kubrick movie, like you know, Clockwork Orange or The Shining or something like that.
Hmm.
So yeah, I mean, it was mostly, I think, other than the plane crash, I think it's all just kind of still camera. But
Yeah.
yeah, the use, you know, the way, you know, the way he would cut between two things like that, or you know, the way he would stage camera angles, and especially the lighting on characters like Doctor Strangelove and things like that, I think really did a whole lot of legwork here in a way that I thought was
Yeah.
really cool.
Was that another intended pun with Doctor Strangelove and legwork?
No, but it should have been. No, that's good though.
Too many great puns. Yeah, that's a great shout. I've never really thought about it that way in terms of like how the movie is shot compared to some of his other movies. But I think what you mentioned before of that, like it's kind of cool that this movie is super like still in the way that the camera is set up, because so much of the action is dictated by like the movement of the dialogue and like the movement of the characters and all that stuff, and the plotting along, whereas like if you just had that in like if you had like still cameras, I guess you kind of do in 2001 or something like that, or like Full Metal Jacket, like the movie would just like feel like it's taking forever. Whereas
Yeah,
here, you know, it's not as necessary. Um, but yeah, that's super
no,
interesting.
exactly.
I don't know if I want to go here yet because I feel like it's a big thing that we can talk a lot about. You know what? Let's
Fair
do
enough.
it. Uh,
All right.
let's do it. The opening sequence, a lot of the movie, there's a lot of like imagery of like sexuality and phallic symbols, and you
Mhm.
know, obviously Slim Pickens riding the bomb at the end. He's just on a big old dingaling. That's the second time, maybe third time on this podcast that I've said the phrase "big old dingaling."
You
The
should try to
first
sneak
one.
it into every episode. I listened to your Boogie Nights episode in preparation for this, and so that was definitely one of them.
That's the one I can think of. That's amazing. I'm working on a soundboard too for the show, so maybe "big old dingaling" will be something that I put on the soundboard, and every time I want to mention a big old dingaling in a movie, I'll just pop it on.
That's brilliant.
But anywho, like, what did you make of all the giant penises and the other sort of, you know, sexual jokes that are littered throughout the movie, and like what sort of commentary Kubrick's doing there?
I mean, I love that. Honestly, it's really funny that you mentioned Barbie related to this because it's like I thought that like it really. I mean, I don't know. I feel like sometimes it's kind of lazy to just be like, oh, that movie was ahead of its time, but it really did kind of feel ahead of the curve in sort of
Hmm.
calling out how like you know like these like toxic masculine environments where it's just these dudes like you know like preening at each other can create something you know so destructive, and you
Yeah.
know it was sort of an indictment on that, and like certainly commentary like that existed before 1964, but it is really interesting to see that in such a major political film, you know, in a
Hmm.
way, you know, in a way that I'm sure it had been done prior, but I certainly hadn't seen it done earlier than that, you know, and
Yeah.
it's I mean it's an indictment on the whole thing, you know, everything from the you know the Major King Kong character to just Buck Turgidson's name. I looked up turgid means like swollen, and you know is often a phrase used to you know attached to big old dinglings. So like his entire character is just that, and obviously the way we meet him with the you know with like the scantily clad secretary and stuff like that,
Yeah.
and it's just so funny how it goes from that all the way to the end where they're talking about the mine shaft community with
Oh
the
my
10 women
god.
for every man. which is like maybe my favorite part of the whole thing is when they're just like, yeah, well, we just go live
Yeah.
the mines. It's just be,
Yeah.
and then Turgison's like, oh yeah, well, we're gonna have to do away with traditional monogamy down there, aren't we? Like that type of. It's just like it's peppered through the whole movie, and it's so like obvious, but at the same time so subtle that it's not just like literally, like literally slapping dicks in your face.
Yeah.
It's really it's so well done. It's such a clear message,
Yeah.
but done so
That's
well.
I don't know if it was, I mean, I'm sure it was, like, to your point, I'm sure it was done before, but probably not to the same level that it's done here, where you finally realize, like, oh, all of, like, war, and especially the Cold War, is just one big dick measuring contest. Like,
Exactly.
like, no one wants to actually, use these bombs, because we saw how awful they can be, but we still want to be the coolest guy in the room, so we got to pretend that we have big old dinglings by continuing to build more bombs and build more bombs than the other guy, and just like all just wrapped up in like the worst kind of stupidity because Jack D. Ripper thinks that commies are putting something in the drinking water that will turn everyone into a communist, which like is both insane. Well, it's insane because like, one, how would they do that? And two, like, okay, like then you have people who
That
have like
actually,
different beliefs.
yeah. No, that shook me because like fluoridization of water is like still a huge like pet conspiracy theory for folks like that, or like even like that clip of Alex Jones going like they're putting stuff in the water to make the frogs gay. It's like that's still like a thing that like
Yeah,
wackos will kind of do is like talk about the fluoride in the water and how it's going to kill all our kids. So
we
like
should bomb the frogs.
yeah, exactly. But like I didn't know how much history that conspiracy had. So when I heard him say it, I was kind of blown away. I was like, wow, I thought it
Yeah,
was a much newer thing.
yeah, it's pretty wild. The Cold War was a crazy time, and
Oh
I
yeah.
feel like it's never fully, like, in like history classes and stuff, it like never fully hit me how weird the Cold War was. Like it's something that lives in like a weird abstract of my mind, and I feel like I can't get a grasp of it. And this movie is the closest thing I have to some sort of tangible object that can like explain to me what was happening and why it was so weird. But it still also doesn't explain like why everyone was acting so cuckoo. It's just like everyone's pretty insane right now, and there are all these bombs, and that seems like a bad combination, right, everyone?
Yeah. Yeah, no, we there isn't quite a modern analog for it. I was trying to think, but like what especially blew my mind was this is a year after the Cuban Missile Crisis. So like probably right before filming happened on this movie, we came as close as we've ever come to nuclear annihilation. And like
Yeah.
to not only be able to process that so clearly so soon after, but to be able to make fun of it, which would I feel like be a tough thing to do now. But back then, it's like this was a little bit before the explosion of like art that was really deeply critical of
Hmm.
of the government and of war and things like that. We're still kind of coming off of the tail of like World War II and deep American
Yeah.
patriotism and stuff. And like honestly, like it took it took a lot of balls to make this. Like like I imagine he must have had some kind of pushback on it.
Yeah. All right, we should talk about this a little bit because I came across some interesting stuff in my research about the movie. But like, that's a great shout that this came a year after the Cuban Missile Crisis, and to be able to process all of those all of those happenings so quickly is like super insane. But apparently Kubrick's original intention with this movie was to make like a serious like spy thriller, or like a sort of like political thriller drama. But as he was writing it, he just like couldn't get past some of the absurdity of like the way that the characters were like acting as he was like putting them on the paper. So he's like, this kind of has to be kind of has to be a comedy. Like there's no other way to make this movie. It has to be satire. And apparently when he was like this was like in his notes or something when they were writing the script, he says if you get a call about nuclear warfare and you're in your office, it's a thriller. If you get it while you're in your living room, it's a drama. But if you get that call while you're in the bathroom, it's a comedy.
Yeah.
And like so what you were saying about Turgidson and his name, I had always just assumed that it was like supposed to be close to turd. And like the fact that he's in the bathroom when he gets the call is like where that whole joke comes in. But yeah, like do you think this movie would play as like just like a regular thriller or drama, or do you think that it had to be a comedy?
I was thinking about that too, because I actually only had just read that today about that. Part of me thinks, I mean, first of all, he was absolutely right. I mean, I think we can all say, in hindsight, like this is the better movie than whatever that would have been.
Mm-hmm.
I like that his idea was just, it was that he was sensing the absurdity in it. He was also like, oh, who's going to want to sit through an hour and a half of like something this serious? It's like bleak, so there's kind of a bit of
Yeah.
that too. And that's what made him bring in like Terry Southern as the other writer who kind of helped with some of the satirical elements. But I I never want to sell Kubrick short. I feel like whatever he would have made would have probably been good to great.
Yeah.
It's just he's just better than almost everybody else doing this. But
Yeah.
I think he was very right to kind of see which way like which way this would play best and which way people would absorb it best at that point.
Mm-hmm.
I think especially after something so serious, and like the concept of something so serious as a nuclear bomb, and only about 20 odd years removed from when it was dropped in Japan, I think this was sort of the way to do it. I think anything else
Yeah.
would have been really a rough watch.
Also considering like the historical period, if he made something kind of critical but like critical and dramatic, it probably, I think to your point, wouldn't hit the same way, or like audiences wouldn't have been as receptive to something like that. That's like just outright criticizing the American government. Like I don't think American audiences were ready for that kind of like, look inward at the country and the people who run it. It needed to be something that they could laugh at. But
yeah, and I'm thinking like the thing is like even that said, it's even now I'm trying to imagine like the closest analog we probably have to this is like I guess 9/11 as far as like childhood tragedies and stuff like that. I'm trying to
yeah,
imagine like a really like goofy, funny, biting 9/11 satire that obviously we've gotten some since, but like under a year out from it,
yeah,
like
like
I feel like that would have been unheard of.
yeah. I know. I'm trying to like wrap my head around like a satire that's like biting, but like not like too silly. That is like looking at Bush era and like to some extent like Obama era, like war on terrorism and how sort of like ridiculous the whole thing is. And I can't think of a movie or another text that is doing something that relates to like that period of time the same way that Strangelove sits in its own period of time. Like it takes a genius like Kubrick to make that work.
Yeah, totally. Or at least like we've gotten some stuff that was a little more literal, like W or something like that, but
Yeah.
nothing quite this abstract.
Yeah. No Jack D. Rippers for our age, unfortunately.
No, sadly.
No no Merc and Muffleys.
Besides the real life ones.
Yeah. Yeah, now we just live in a world of real life Merkins and Rippers and Major Kongs. Did you
Yeah.
come across the piece of trivia about how Slim Pickens came into this movie?
Yeah, well, I read that like Peter Sellers was originally he played 3 roles. He was originally supposed to play 5, I think, because he was
Yeah.
supposed to be Kong and he was supposed to be Turgidson. And I think with Turgidson, he was basically turned to Kubrick, was like, come on, bro, I can't be like 3 people in this room. But with Kong, I think it sounds like he got pretty close to actually playing him, right?
Mm-hmm. Apparently, he didn't want to play him because he he wasn't confident in his Texan accent, and
Mm-hmm.
there was a mysterious fall or not fall that happened while Sellers and Kubrick were arguing about it, and Sellers may or may not have broken or twisted his ankle, which then like limited him in being able to shoot the scenes in the cockpit. But I feel like whatever happened, if he actually broke his leg and couldn't do it, or if he faked the injury, I feel like it was a great it was a great turn for us, because Slim Pickens, like, you can't imagine anyone else, riding that big old dingling at the end,
Yeah, totally.
waving a cowboy hat in the air. It's just too perfect.
Yeah. And Slim Pickens is just that guy all the time, as far as I can tell. I mean, like thinking about him in like Blazing Saddles and stuff like that. It's just kind of like,
Yeah.
if you need that guy, that's who you called. And Peter Sellers is such a genius that, like,
Mhm.
honestly, I there is a world where I could, like, I'm sure his performance wasn't as bad as he thought it was.
Yeah.
I'm glad it turned out this way. I do think, like, I get what Kubrick was trying to do. I think he was basically trying to say, like, no matter where you looked, like Peter Sellers was holding the keys to the world, like
Yeah.
whatever part you were looking at. But I think he
Yeah.
was still able to achieve that effect with three of them, and I think like five would have kind of pushed it in uncanny valley territory. It's just like everybody's Peter
Yeah.
Sellers,
Yeah.
and we would have missed out on two of like the great performances in this film, with George C. Scott and Slim Pickens for sure.
Yeah. Ready to go toe to toe war with the Ruskies.
Yeah.
My other favorite piece of trivia about this movie, and I think this is my last one, I don't know if you caught it, but the line where Kong is going through like the little booklet, or like the case of things that they have with the with the tiny Bible and book of Russian phrases. Which, side note, I don't know if you have the Criterion Collection DVD of this, but in that box set, there's like a little envelope labeled top secret, and there's like a top secret. Wait, give me 1 sec,
Oh,
because
nice.
it's
Yeah.
pretty awesome. So yeah, there's this little top secret booklet, and in it they have a fake Playboy with some essays about the movie, and then another essay as this like top secret document, code R, and then credits and notes about the cinematography in this Holy Bible and Russian phrases
Wow.
little booklet.
That's so cool. I actually like. I don't have the Criterion, but I always hit up in like July and December when they have like the half off sale.
Yeah,
And like just like 4 days ago, I was like, oh man, yeah, no, like I'm gonna go hit that sale and buy this one. And I realized, like, oh shit, I just missed it. So I'll probably be a cheap bastard and hold out till December. But I did
yeah,
buy it on Amazon at least, so I have
it's
it. I have it streamable. But like that's definitely one I'm gonna get next time.
it's worth it. I bought the DVD not knowing that it had all that stuff. I was like, it's one of my favorite movies. I should probably own it on physical. And when I finally went to watch it and saw that, I was like, oh, this like totally. Even if I if I never watched the movie, having that little booklet makes it totally worth it.
Yeah, totally.
That's a weird tangent from the other piece of trivia. So when he's going through all of the stuff in that little case or whatever, and he says a fella could have a pretty good weekend in Vegas with all this stuff. The original line was Dallas, and
Oh,
it's
really?
dubbed over, but the movie was supposed to come out, I forgot the date, November something of 63, and
Wow.
JFK gets assassinated in Dallas, and they're like, well, one, we have to push this movie because we can't do a satire about nuclear war and, including a presidential character that's kind of a buffoon, the weekend after our president got assassinated. And we should also change the line about having a pretty good time in Dallas,
Oh my
considering
God, that's
that's where he got
crazy.
shot. Yeah.
Yeah, no, probably a good move on that part.
Yeah.
I didn't realize they had to push the release date. I was thinking like even because I think it came out in like January of '64 or like
Yeah.
early '64 for sure.
Yeah.
And even that, I was thinking like this is close to that assassination to make a movie making fun of the president.
Yeah. That
And like especially during that time of like such high scrutiny on all like on anything that resembled political commentary, like craziness to come out that early.
Yeah. That would have been a totally different story if the movie stuck to its original release date.
Yeah.
Absolutely wild. Okay, I have one other thing that I want to ask you about, and then but I don't know if you have any other topics or items that you wanted to bring up. But
Trying to think. Yeah. But no, go on. I'll see if I have anything else.
the music in this is awesome. Kubrick's choices of like soundtrack is always incredible. The "We'll Meet Again" at the end is super iconic. But I wanted to ask what you made of apparently the song is called "When Johnny Comes Marching Home," but like that traditional sort of like military marching song that's playing while the B-52 plane is like flying over Russia. You have this like super traditional like music of how we've thought of wars to be fought, and like this new age technology of how wars are going to be fought going forward. So like I don't know what you made of that or the song choice at the end.
Yeah, I that was another thing that was really interesting to me. Is this is one of the only Kubrick movies I've seen that doesn't have like this really complex score. I mean, you could do full, for almost any other Kubrick movie, you could do a full podcast just on, on like the musical accompaniments. And this one I think is all, I don't think there is any score. I think it's all like licensed, songs.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, it was such a simple but effective way to show that, that area of things happening, just the idea. I mean, I think Johnny Goes Marching Home is supposed to be like a fairly positive look of like, somebody going to glory and coming back, and like all the pride that awaits them when it's home. And instead, it's just these like jerks on an airplane who are like reading Playboys and playing cards, and then this cowboy who I guess does not come marching home because he rides the big dingling down into the. But it was a good juxtaposition that like probably even back then hit even harder, because I'm sure that type of music was like all over the place, and that kind of like, hyper patriotic look at war, but it was such a simple and easy way for Kubrick to be like, look at these jerks, like they don't know what they're doing. And I love that he did it every time. Like it was just always underscoring that part of the movie.
Bunch of jackasses looking at Playboys and playing cards. A bunch of jackasses that includes James Earl Jones.
Yeah, I guess was that like it had to be an early role for him, I guess. But
it may have been his first.
Yeah, I didn't catch like his name in the credits or anything, so I was fully like the Leo DiCaprio pointing thing when he started talking. I was like, oh my god, I know that guy.
This week I watched The Sandlot and Dr. Strangelove, and it was a weird James Earl Jones double feature. But
but you can't go. He's so good. I mean, even in just these little bits and pieces, like he's so singular.
Yeah, I feel like we should probably talk about the ending and the title character.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
You brought it up before, the whole like mine shaft scene, which is incredible. Yeah, what did you think of Strangelove himself and his like little bit part at the end?
It's funny like how, like time wise, how comparatively like small amounts of the movie he's in, for the fact that it's named after him. And that he ultimately brings around the ending. But he is kind of the impetus for this whole thing, I suppose, with his technology and his sort of like, like, I don't even care what side I'm on. I'm just, like just pushing like the mad science forward. Yeah. But I mean, it just goes to show how, like, because the other two roles that Sellers plays in this movie are fairly straight up and down. I mean, obviously they have their funny moments, but they're I wouldn't quite call them larger than life, but here he just kind of goes all out in a way that's so great. And like, like everything was physical movements. I loved, I was watching this morning and I saw where he first comes out, he like sort of brings his hand up to grab the cigarette only to pass it to his other hand and just put it right back in his mouth. And like, that was such a fun choice that he clearly did like right on the fly, that I feel like sold so much of the character in like 1 second.
Yeah.
And like, obviously like politically there's definitely a lot to pull from it. I think certainly him being like a Nazi doctor, I would assume is a huge comment on like Operation Paperclip and the idea of like how we in real life took a lot of these like Nazi like aerospace folks and like rocket scientists and brought them over and kind of like patted out NASA and things like that with it. Obviously I would say this is a huge indictment against that. This is where I would say there is another Oppenheimer connection, and I don't want to tell you what it is, but let me know if you maybe see a connection having to do with the Doctor Strangelove character.
Okay.
In Oppenheimer. I had a point about it, but I really don't want to like pull, if you're going to go see it tomorrow, I don't want to like pull you from that. But maybe keep an eye out for something there.
Okay. I'll definitely text you with notes after I see the movie. Obviously, by the time this episode comes out, it will have been a while after Oppenheimer came out. So, like, most of our listening audience will have probably seen it by then. But I do appreciate you holding back for my sake.
Oh yeah, no, I'm curious. You're kind of like me too, where it's like you don't like blindly love everything Nolan does. So I'm actually really curious how you're going to feel about this one.
Yeah, I have an interesting relationship with Nolan. I'll leave it at that.
Big same.
Yeah. Kubrick, not so much.
Yeah.
This movie, not so much. I have a weird leap that I want to take with the ending of Strangelove. That is something I haven't. It's a take I'm sort of workshopping right now, and we have a rule at Screen Age Wasteland where we try to not get too political with our chatter about movies, but I feel like when you're talking about a movie like Doctor Strangelove, it's kind of hard to ignore the politics of it because it's like literally the entire point of the movie. But I think at the end, that last line, from Strangelove, my fear I can walk, or my legs work. I forgot which one it is.
I think it was like I wrote it, but I think it's my fear I can walk.
Yeah. So,
incredible line read, just on its own, just so good.
Absolutely bonkers line read. Like if that doesn't just like blow you away from just like a ballsiness perspective in terms of directing, like I don't know what will. But the sort of political leap that I'm taking is that in a way, like the destruction of the world, the what's the bomb called that the Russians make? The
Doomsday Machine?
The Doomsday Machine. The fact that the Doomsday Machine ends up going off right after Strangelove stands up and says, "My fear I can walk," which is like this, like he's like a Nazi who is literally rising up, and then the world ends, and it's like, oh, like this nuclear race thing is kind of just like the Nazis winning because we're still destroying like everyone else in the world and not existing in like a world of like peace and unity and whatever the Allies like in theory were fighting for in World War II. I don't know if Kubrick was like necessarily making that point, but it was just like something that was sort of spinning around in my head. So I figured I'd workshop the take here and get your thoughts on it.
I think you're totally right. I think at the very least, it's certainly a comment that like what we're doing here, building up a nuclear arsenal, showing our power, all that it's fascism in its own way, like it's like this idea that like we can just go to any part of the world and erase it completely, is sort of a concept that's being furthered, that came about in Nazi Germany. So I think like certainly that's a very deliberate connection, that Kubrick makes. And I think it's probably a comment on white supremacy too, and the idea of a master race, leading to just total destruction. It's not the first time Kubrick is tangled with that. Like he, this is not far removed from like communist blacklisting and things like that. And also obviously the civil rights movement was huge at that point. And he kind of took a lot of that on in Spartacus, and it being kind of a comment about like rooting out, like slavery and like rooting out, people who try to dismantle the power structures and things like that. And so I think he's very, I think Kubrick is very much of a mindset that like this sort of
Yeah.
mentality could lead to total destruction. And I think historically he's only been proven right on that one. But yeah, no, I think
Yeah.
you're spot on with that.
Yeah. It's do you think it's a happy ending? It's a weird question to ask.
No, but it's especially with like such jovial music playing, and even the idea
Yeah.
of we'll meet again is obviously like a really optimistic sort of message.
Yeah.
I mean, no, but also kind of. It's sort of like I mean, I think you can just look at it like Slim Pickens on the bomb. Like it's sort of like we're marching to our doom either way, so we might as well do it with a smile on our
Yeah.
face, I suppose. So like overtly no, but in some ways I think he tries to be like as tongue in cheek and possible about it.
I mean, the subtitle of the movie that I said I wasn't going to say out is "Or How I Learned to Stop Worrying and Love the Bomb." Is that it?
Yeah,
Yeah. So like,
yeah, and I spent a lot of time trying to figure out who the I was in that
yeah.
sentence.
So something I read in relation to this movie is that the I is the camera, which is, I guess, like the camera is always in place of the audience. So like
Mhm.
at the end and like it's really weird because with the music and sort of the way that the mushroom clouds are shot, it's almost like calming watching them.
Mhm.
Like after all of this madness of these silly men fighting in rooms and making awful decisions one after another, there's like this weird bliss of like watching all of these mushroom clouds while the music plays, and it's like, I kind of like this bomb. It maybe it's not so bad after all, which is
Yeah,
also like a pretty weird take, but I can sort of get behind it.
it's yeah. I mean, I think it's a lot about like ceding the control that you don't have. I think certainly a lot of people at that point and now are like very logically concerned about the fact that like all these idiots are sitting on these gigantic warheads, and it's sort of like there's nothing any of us can do about it. Like nobody can
Yeah,
go in there and like get rid of it. And so it's sort of this joke of like, oh, I'll just stop worrying and love it. And it's
yeah,
both. It rings true, but is also obviously like deeply cynical. It's like,
yeah.
well, fuck, this is how it is forever.
It in a way, all and like I don't think that this movie, or I don't think the movie that I'm going to talk about right now is in any way like anywhere close to Doctor Strangelove. But one of the better moments of Don't Look Up is when they're sitting around the dining room table and just sort of accept the fate of like they're all going to die.
Yeah.
And like I guess in a way you could say that movie is like trying to pull a lot from Strangelove
Oh
unsuccessfully.
yeah, absolutely.
But yeah, I was kind of thinking about like I think we're sort of past a like war on terror paranoia in this country, and I think we're entering a phase of like climate anxiety that is like our new form
Mhm.
of paranoia, and like maybe we need to stop worrying and like love that bomb. um
Yeah.
so maybe someone could make a good version of Don't Look Up that is pulling from Strangelove in the same ways.
Yeah, that would be cool. Yeah, I was trying to think of modern day movies that like really pulled from Strangelove, and I found a couple which we'll get to, but
Yeah.
like that was one that actually didn't cross my mind, probably because I kind of repressed that movie to the deep recessions of my brain. But no, you're right. I mean that aspect of it, and especially that ending, are like, I mean, I think is clear as day, like pulled from this,
Yeah.
and this idea of like, I think there's also something a little bit about the responsibility of this kind of being, especially when you think about like climate anxiety and stuff, where it's like there's this overwhelming feeling of like we ourselves are responsible for the climate crisis, and if I get like a plastic straw, that's going to help with
Yeah.
the climate crisis. Well, no, that no point looking at larger political spheres, larger
Yeah.
corporations, things like that are like dumping shit into the ozone layer
Yeah.
constantly. And I think there's a bit of that mentality in this movie too, of like it's on you to stop worrying about this because we're fine, like.
Yeah. We've got things figured out up here in this war room, and on our various military bases and stuff. But if you guys just do those drills where you hide underneath the desk in case the Russians decide to bomb us, then like you'll be cool and everything
Yeah, exactly.
will work itself out. So all right, to end our conversation on like maybe a bit of a lighter note, I think the writing on the bomb that says nuclear warhead, handle with care, is one of the funniest jokes in the movie.
It's so good. Yeah, no, that, and then they wrote, I think, what did they write? Like Hi There and then Dear John on the two actual bombs.
Yeah.
And then the Hi There one's the one that goes down. It's
Yeah.
just so like, and I guess they did do that in World War II. They wrote stuff on like missiles and things like that. But I mean, that's taken to such a dark extreme of like, oh my God.
Handle with care. So silly. Yeah, man, this has been a great conversation. We kind of touched on maybe dipping into some recommendations, but do you have any other notes or items that you had?
I still like, I just like, I can't get over that this got made when it did, I was doing some reading recently about, there, I think like 3 or 4 years before this movie, there was a comedy album that was made called The Kennedy Family, or I think The First Family or something like that. And all it was this guy doing like a John F. Kennedy impersonation on record. And it was very like dated, hokey, like late 50s, early 60s jokes about the president that were not really ripping into him at all. It was just sort of like him doing a funny Kennedy voice and, like them like going on a picnic or stuff like that. Yeah. And it was a really popular album. It won like album of the year and stuff like that at the time, which is hilarious to think about now. Yeah. But even something like so light and just kind of acknowledging the president in a funny way still, I think, drew the eye of like Secret Service and people like that who kind of investigated this comedian to make sure he wasn't some kind of like, like provocateur of some sort, and it turns out he wasn't. Just a guy, yeah, or that, absolutely. And to go from that to our dumbass president and his Nazi scientist sidekick are going to destroy the entire human race while they hide in a mine shaft in the span of mere years is crazy. I meant to look into like if Kubrick ever got any backlash or if like there was, if like the FBI got involved, it would still be like the Hoover era FBI at that point, and I'm wondering if he ever got any crap for it because like, to think about something so benign a couple of years before getting so much trouble, to this is like, I mean, it's crazy to think about. So, it really, like, again, I don't like saying ahead of its time, but like, it really can't be understated how courageous it is to put something out like this. I think in like a very wide release, I'm pretty sure it was like a major Hollywood release. Certainly Peter Sellers was a major star at that point, and to do something like that, I mean, even nowadays, it's hard to think of, much of an equivalent,
Totally. So you reminded me of something. You actually mentioned it before, but Slim Pickens in Blazing Saddles. So this episode is dropping. We're doing a special 2-for-1 to kick off season 2 of the Canon. So the 2 episodes that are dropping, we got 2 satires. We got Dr. Strangelove and Blazing Saddles. Oddly enough,
that's awesome.
Big Wednesday for Slim Pickens. So good, good for him. But one of the things that we talked about in our Blazing Saddles episode is with that movie, people really love saying the phrase, "This couldn't get made today." And we try to, we try to make a conscious effort to avoid saying that, but I'm going to say it for Dr. Strangelove. And the reason I'm going to say it for Dr. Strangelove is why this movie couldn't get made today is, and this is sort of similar to the question that you were raising, but there was like, I think the US Navy and just like the armed forces in general sort of, what's the word that I'm looking for? They sort of just like fully like rejected this movie. They did no consulting whatsoever. When it came out, they were like, none of this could actually happen. Like there's no need to worry. And I was just thinking about like, if someone like set out to make a movie like this today, where the Department of Justice like is so heavily involved in consulting like so many movies that get made where they're invoked in like the smallest way. I think for that reason, like Strangelove could never be made today. So I do wonder if to your point, like was the FBI like knocking on Kubrick's door like, hey man, what the hell are you doing? Like you can't make this movie. It seems like it didn't happen because he got a lot of like NASA consultants on 2001. So maybe they saw it and they were like, this Kubrick guy's just too good.
Or they watched it like, that Dr. Strangelove guy is dope. Like,
yeah. Is he real? We're,
Can we meet him?
we're
No, but yeah, no, I think you're right. I mean, certainly, like, if it could be made now, it would be much more of a firebrand for controversy. Like, it would dominate the news cycle. It would be like, one of those, like, I would be like kind of the reverse Sound of Freedom. Be like, see this if you care about, society or whatever. And it's like,
yeah,
oh, if you hate it, then like, like that kind of thing.
yeah,
Um, Actually, one thing you said did make me think of one more thing, which is the opening crawl of the movie. Where they put the kind of like
yeah,
basically they try to cover their ass and be like,
yeah.
the Navy, the Air Force, will fight hard to prevent this from ever happening. And that felt so deliberate, both in the sense of them protecting themselves, but also like I feel like you read that and there's no way you can think anything besides like this is bullshit. Like they have no control over, like you read like
Yeah,
they're like, we'll do everything we can to prevent this. And I'm like, the entire point of this movie is that they cannot do
is
anything.
that they can't. Yeah, if Jack D. Ripper goes rogue, he's going rogue, and it's going to be a problem for everyone. Like
Yeah, so I
there's,
thought that was such a great opening.
yeah,
Yeah, here's this, but actually,
it just adds to the comedy. Too good. This movie is too good. This is.
mhm.
I know you mentioned it before. This is probably one of my favorite movies of all time. This is like for me top 5, just like greatest things ever put on film. So I'm very happy that it's in the canon. I'm very happy that we got to talk about it. I'm happy that I got to talk to you about it. This has been a super fun conversation about one of my favorite movies. Thanks, man. Thanks
Yeah,
for joining.
totally. I'm happy to follow up on the like 15-year promise I gave you in high school
Yeah.
that I would watch this movie.
We'll have to see if there are any other movies that we spoke about or like recommended to each other back then.
Yeah.
But haven't gotten to. If you're ready for it, I think I'm ready to jump into some recommendations.
Yeah.
Okay, so we'll go 1-1, 2-2, 3-3. So if you want to kick it off with your
Cool. Yeah.
top rec or first rec.
The first thing that immediately came to mind when I saw this movie was a you may have seen it, but like I feel like it did not have a very big splash. But a couple of years ago, there was this movie called The Death of Stalin that came out.
Oh
It was in
yeah.
like 2017, and it's so similar to this. I had seen it before, and I watched it again after Strangelove as a comparison. And it's
Mhm.
like a super. I mean, it's about obviously the death of Joseph Stalin and like the kind of power vacuum that exists in the Soviet Union after that, and all these
Mhm.
guys like fighting to get his position. But it's an outright farcical comedy. It's like Steve Buscemi's Nikita Khrushchev and like Michael Palin from Monty Python's in it, and Jeffrey
Yeah.
Tambor, and it's all these like really great character actors in this insanely funny whip tight script about this. And I just watched again this week, and it's like, first of all, I'm certain it had to take Doctor Strangelove as a huge inspiration. But like, if you like that type of thing, it's a really great, really quick watch,
Yeah.
and it's outrageously funny. It's Armando Iannucci who directed it, who's the guy who did Veep, which I actually haven't really watched that much, but it seems like that's sort of his area.
Yeah. I saw it years ago and I remember really liking
Mhm.
it, but I feel like I have to give it like another sort of proper watch. But that's a great shout. Nice. That's a good first shout. Okay. For my first pick, I always like to list like 5 and then
Mhm.
just see how I'm feeling and pick 3 from there. So I think the first one I'm going to go with is another Kubrick movie. The only real connection to Strangelove is that Sterling Hayden, who plays Jack D. Ripper, is also in said Kubrick movie. I don't know if you've ever seen The Killing, but
I
that's my
haven't. I've been meaning
recommendation.
to.
Yeah, it's
Oh,
super
nice.
super short, super quick. It's like it kind of plays like a Coen Brothers movie, like sort of like Fargo-esque, but it's
Mhm.
like super fun. It's like it's obviously not the best thing that he's ever made. It was like super early in his career, but it is a very, very good watch. So that's what I'm going with for my first rec.
Oh, nice. Hopefully, it won't take me 15 years, but I'll
Yeah,
get to it for sure.
we'll
No,
check back in.
I've heard it's good, and yeah, the only early Kubrick movie I've seen that goes before this, like I said, is Spartacus. So like, there's definitely there is a good handful of films over there that like I should really
Yeah,
check out.
I have to check out Spartacus. I've never seen it. I think is there like a lot of drama around that movie, or like behind the scenes with Kubrick and working with
Yeah,
studios and stuff?
well, the writer was this guy Dalton Trumbo, who I believe there's also a movie about him called Trumbo that Bryan Cranston was in, which I have not seen, but I think covers a lot of this.
Hmm.
If I and like forgive me anybody listening who knows more about this, because like I could just butcher this whole thing, but like I'm pretty sure he was blacklisted or almost blacklisted as a communist, and so there was a lot of controversy with bringing him on to write, even though he was like I think a fairly renowned Hollywood writer, and so
Hmm.
Kubrick kind of like put his ass on the line to get him to write Spartacus, which, as I said, like really deals with sort of like the in
Yeah,
its own way, like the blacklisting thing.
yeah,
So yeah, I think that was a lot of it. Although forgive me if I got anything wrong, I'm gonna have to do a little more reading into it.
yeah. That's a big blind spot for me. So maybe in the next 15 years I'll get to it.
Yeah, and then should I throw out my second one?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah. So I thought of another movie. I thought of really quickly after this was Network, the like the 1976 Sidney Lumet movie.
Oh,
Um,
nice. That actually might be in the
yeah,
canon. Was this
that's
the
that's
one
why
that
I hit you the other day. It was like I know you said don't recommend anything in the canon. Like I don't know if this is or not, but
you know what? That's a totally fair, because that movie like could definitely be in the canon, but could also see a world where it's not.
yeah, for sure. I mean, I won't blow it wide open if there's going to be an episode later, but I think it has to do. Obviously, it's about a television network instead of group of politicians, but it is a similar thing where it's like this huge group of like great stars popping up, and it's just about these guys in power who have no idea what they're doing as they run this network, and kind of the crazy extents that it goes to when things just spiral out of control and pretty much shit hits the fan from the first scene in that movie. And there's like so many like great towering performances in it, and it's very very dark but also extremely funny at certain points, and it was that one was always one of my favorites. I saw it for the first time in like film school, and it's a good favorite of mine. But I thought of that a lot when I was watching this one.
Nice. Okay, so I double checked with our producers. It's not in the canon, so
Oh, cool.
a double great shout. Yeah, man, I haven't seen that movie in years. I feel like the first time I watched it, it didn't really click for me, but I feel like I watched it in high school when I was going through like, here are all the movies that you need to watch if you want to consider yourself
Hmm.
a film snob or whatever. And watching it at 16, it just didn't click for me, but I should probably try it again now.
Yeah, you might get more of it now. I mean, it's tonally super strange because you go in thinking it's just going to be this like drama about a network or something, and
Yeah.
it goes absolutely off the rails in so many different ways. But I think also like maybe some of the commentary on it would ring a little more now, as we get older and get a
Yeah.
little more cynical. Yeah.
Sweet. Nice. I like it. Did you go with 3 movies?
No, the third one's not a movie.
Okay. Sweet. I think I'm going to go with 3 movies. I
Okay.
unfortunately couldn't think of anything else. My second pick, I'm going to go with something that is. I was trying to think of like movies about like war and paranoia, and I couldn't think of too many. But one that I kept coming back to, and I didn't really want to recommend it, but because it just kept popping up into my head in terms of a movie about paranoia surrounding war. I don't know if you've seen the movie Downfall about Hitler's final days and like
Yeah,
the
I
end
have.
of Nazi Germany, but that movie is like pretty wild,
Hmm.
and it's like made by German filmmakers. So it's like an interesting look at like how Germans view the end of the war and the end of Hitler's regime. And obviously like, you know, war and paranoia, like no one goes more hand in hand with that than Adolf Hitler. So it felt like a good pick. I couldn't think of anything Cold War related, so that's my war and paranoia recommendation. Downfall.
No, for sure, and that's a great movie. It I feel like it hit the popular conscience a lot a couple of years ago when like that one scene of Hitler like screaming at the people in his bunker was just kind of used for memes, and like they put different subtitles underneath it where it's like,
Yeah.
like Hitler finds out that that Ned Stark dies or something,
Yeah.
and like that shit was so funny. But if you actually go back to the movie, it's such a like it's one of my favorite like World War II era movies. It's so
Yeah.
like it's such an interesting look at it, and like really, yeah, it's as much about like German guilt about the situation as it is about anything else. It's like it's
Yeah.
really like it's a fascinating watch, and I forget the name of the guy who played Hitler, but he's just so good.
Yeah. I think that guy has like unfortunately been typecast as like the German actor to play Nazis and or
Yeah,
Hitler. Like I think he's maybe played Hitler in multiple movies.
yeah. I mean, look,
Or-
somebody's got to do it.
That's like if there are any actors who are complaining about being typecast, like just talk to that guy. Like that is the
Yeah.
worst typecasting of all time.
Oh yeah. But hopefully he got an award for it or something like
Yeah.
that at least. I don't know. If I can represent the Jewish delegation, he gets a pass from me.
That's fair. Very fair. Sweet. What's your all right, what's the non-movie recommendation?
So this one was also one that like I feel like the connection to this is not super obvious, and it kept popping in my head while I was watching this, and I couldn't figure out why because it's like the themes aren't exactly the same, the subject matter isn't exactly the same. But
Mm-hmm.
for some reason, I kept thinking about the Bioshock video game series, specifically the first one.
Oh shit. I'm not a big video game guy, but I've heard those are great.
Oh yeah, if you're ever making a foray into video games, like there's really like I can't really think of any game that's more cinematic than Bioshock, especially the first
Mm-hmm.
one. And like what it deals with is like it's sort of this like post-apocalyptic feeling sort of thing, and the first one takes place in this like giant underground city that basically looks like like 1930s era New York. But it's all sorry, I think I said underground, but I meant to say underwater. It's this whole thing underneath the ocean. It's this giant city, but it's at this point been completely like bombed out, and like most of the people there have like died or left, and like you're kind of left exploring it, trying to figure out what it is with all these monsters and like larger than life characters and things like that. And at first I was trying to think about this paired with Dr. Strangelove because it like doesn't really have to do with like atomic bombs or political figures or anything like that, but it
Mm-hmm.
does. I realized like two things. One is that it definitely has the same feeling of like the pride of a bunch of dumb men in a movie thinking they can make something larger than life only to have it unmake them, is sort
Mm-hmm.
of a big thing that happens in this. Dr. Strangelove as a character would also fit very well in this game. There's a lot of these like mad scientist types who like are like
Yeah.
super eccentric and like hold the keys to civilization, but are actually just like, are just like nutty, like nutty as hell. And also like the most literal sense was like this giant underwater city felt a lot like the mine shaft community
Yeah.
concept in the movie. And so it's like Bioshock is like, what if they did the mine shaft thing, but they put it underwater and it all just completely went to shit.
Yeah.
So if you ever they it's from 2007, but they reissue it a
Yeah.
ton. So if you ever find yourself with a current generation console, you can probably play it pretty easily. And it's not super long, but it's like it plays out like a movie almost more than any other game I've played. It's like super cinematic and really well done, and also has some of the old timey songs like we'll meet. I don't know if we'll meet again's literally in it, but like a lot of stuff
Yeah.
like that
Something like that.
soundtracks
Yeah.
it. So it kind of fits in it a little bit.
Nice. I've heard great things about the game. What do you game on? Are you a PlayStation guy? Xbox?
Yeah,
PC?
I grew up. I had the N64 as a kid, so I'll always have some love for Nintendo. But mostly
Yeah.
these days, like I have a PS5 now, and like I've just been playing PlayStation mostly. I think
Sweet.
Bioshock actually was originally an Xbox game, but they've since put it on everything.
Okay. Cool. I might check it out. I do have a PlayStation 5, not
Oh,
OG
nice.
PlayStation. Yeah.
You could probably buy the whole series for like 20-30 bucks, and like it's totally worth your time. Like people have been more critical about the second and third games.
Yeah.
I don't think they're as effective as the first one, but they're all in their own way pretty effective, and it's like it's a good experience that you probably wouldn't have
Yeah.
to pay a lot for.
I might check it out. I
Yeah.
I'm thinking about it, and I can't remember specifically, but there may have been a previous episode where someone recommended BioShock, just because I've had like other people on who are into gaming a bit more than I am, but I can't remember
Mhm.
specifically if anyone recommended BioShock. But either way, a good shout, and I think I should probably play it at some point. I need to up my video gaming. Um, that's a conversation for another day. All right,
Fair
so
enough.
I said before I was going to go with 3 movies, but I don't totally love all of my other movie options. So I think I might do a last minute audible. And it's a bit of a stretch in terms of how it's connected, but I feel like it is one of the better sort of text of like Cold War era, just like artwork. And I think in some ways it is sort of dealing with the same like issues of powerful men in these closed off rooms who, we think should be doing their job a certain kind of way, or, we should hold them to a different kind of standard than like we would hold ourselves to, but they're really just a bunch of bozos at the end of the day. So I'm going to go with, for my final recommendation, I'm going to go with the Animals album by Pink Floyd.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, kind of random, but I wanted to throw in some music. I feel like it's been a while since I've recommended an album, so I'm going to go with that one.
No, it certainly works for this. There's a clear parallel there, and like
Yeah.
it took me a while to get into Pink Floyd, even during like my full on classic rock phase.
Yeah.
I didn't quite dive into Pink Floyd, but Animals is actually probably my favorite Pink Floyd album. And I think
Yeah.
a lot of that is the reason for it. Like the imagery is really clear and really well thought out,
Yeah.
but it's also like just really compositionally so impressive.
I went on a weird Pink Floyd kick like a couple weeks ago. I don't know
Hmm.
what triggered it. I think I heard Brain Damage and I was like, oh yeah, that band is cool. I should listen
Yeah,
to their music again. And I listened to Animals and I was like, yeah, Pigs is still like, it totally kicks ass.
yeah,
You know, like people should just make 11-minute songs again.
yeah. No, I mean it's you're seeing it pop up a little bit, but like yeah, no, like I have that debate with Jake, or our mutual friend, about it a
Yeah.
lot. But like Jake is really about like if you can't say it in 2 minutes and 50 seconds, don't bother. Where I'm like, nah, make it like 15 minutes.
Yeah. Give me Frank Ocean's Pyramids all the time.
There you
Give me
go. There you
give
go.
me
Yeah,
Purple Rain, give me Pigs, give me all of that stuff. Love a
yeah,
I love a
totally.
good 10-minute jam.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
Sweet. All right, let's do one last spin through our recommendations, and then we'll wrap this some bitch up. So yeah, you can go first and just rattle off all 3.
Oh, cool. Yeah. So my recommendations are the Death of Stalin, the movie Network, and the BioShock game series, specifically the first one.
Sweet. I've got Stanley Kubrick's The Killing. I've got director whose name escapes me at the moment, Downfall, and I've got Pink Floyd's album Animals. Mr. David Cohan, thank you again for joining me. This has been one of my favorite episodes. This was a ton of fun. Like I said before, one of my favorite movies, and I'm very happy that I got to talk about it specifically with you. I feel like this is just a continuation of what we used to do in high school, shooting the shit about movies that we dig and recommending movies to each other. I am kind of surprised that you didn't find a way to tie in one of the Fast and Furious movies, but
I tried. I really, any way I could throw that in, I'd be happy to. But I think this time it was a little tough.
yeah. For the next time we have you on, you'll bring in some sort of connection to one of the Fast
Yeah,
and
I mean,
Furious
I'm
movies.
sure at least 4 of those 10 films are in the canon. So just whichever one you want to bring me on for. No, but no, dude, this was awesome. I mean, it was great to catch up, and I love that all these years later we can still have these conversations. And
Yeah, man.
it's nice to not do it on Twitter for a change. no character
Yeah,
limits and things like
it's
that.
yeah, it's nice to actually chat with each other. Do you have anything to plug, any upcoming projects or recent projects that you worked on that people should check out, or where can people find you online, all that good stuff?
Oh yeah, I don't have like a website or any kind of like. I probably should at this point, but like since the work isn't directly coming from my pen, like I've never
Yeah.
really thrown it together. But like, I mean, there's this little movie called Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse that came out a couple months ago. Maybe you've heard of it, but like, definitely that was the most recent thing. I worked on marketing for that, so like a lot of the billboards, stuff like that. That was all our team. But the movie itself is totally worth the hype, and go check it out. And I'm working on another movie at this moment called The Marvels, from a little known studio.
Yeah.
I think everybody listening has already decided if they're going to go see a Marvel movie or not. So I'm not really going to say you should go see it if you haven't thought about it. But it's that is something I'm working on. And if you feel like going to see, like the 50th superhero film, that is that I did help out a little bit on that one. And there is a really talented team of people that I work with on it. So however you feel about MCU movies, the guys doing the visual effects are super nice and super cool, and that's the next thing that I did. That's gonna come out.
Sweet. Yeah, check it out, because that's a good reminder that there are a lot of people who work on these movies who do really good work. And even if have Marvel fatigue in general or whatever, there are still real people who work on these and do important artwork, and they work really hard at what they do, and we should appreciate the art that they make for us. If you can sort of remove that appreciation for what they do from whatever your thoughts are about the larger MCU or Hollywood industry as a whole. So thanks for
Yeah,
that reminder.
totally.
Yeah.
At least be
Dude,
nice to us on Twitter.
yeah, that very least we'll all agree to do that. We'll be a little bit nicer on Twitter. We'll only yell
There
at
you go.
the studio execs, not the people just doing their freaking jobs and
Yeah, and
making
absolutely
cool
yell
art.
at them because they need to pay their writers and their actors.
Yeah. That is, I think those are wise words to end with. Yell at the studio execs so that they can pay the writers and actors, so that everyone who works in various different art forms within the industry can do the work that they should be doing. Sir,
Totally.
thank you again.
Yeah, man, happy to do it. This is a ton of fun, and anytime you want me, I'm here.